All right, y'all. Good to see everybody. Before we start, I want to make a really serious announcement. We are not going to be talking about Gen AI or co-pilots in this room. If you're looking for that, it's the only room in the entire conference where we're not doing that. So, no, but thanks for joining. Let me intro myself, and then I want to intro my panelists here. So, my name is OKeefe. For the past 15 years, I've been running people analytics at Amazon, Google, JP Morgan, some other places, working with some really strong CHROs. I run my own people analytics company now called Icona Analytics. And I am psyched to be sitting with three very, very incredible CHROs. So Mike Clementi. Mike is the CHRO at Pet Vet Care Centers. It's a KKR portfolio company, and he spent years previously at Unilever. Terrell is the CHRO at Menlo Security. It's a late-stage cyber security company focused on securing the browser. And she has previously held roles at Akana, Driscoll, Whirlpool, and Accenture. And Emily Chardac is the Chief People Officer at One, which is a JV backed by Walmart and Ribbit, and previously held roles at Square, Guggenheim, Capital, and Mozilla. So we've got a good conversation in store for you today, and we're going to riff this. We're going to be free flow, organic. This is not going to be scripted, pretty unplugged. So we'll take questions as they come, we hope, but we're going to try and use the time as best we can. So to start off, I wanted to go back into some of the conversations that we had in our prep sessions, the one prep session we had. And a theme that kept coming up was enterprise and startup, and it's this dichotomy. It's kind of a false dichotomy. It's not an either or. It's a bit of a scale depending on stage and size and maturity of company. And there's a lot of considerations there if you're thinking about leaving a rather large established company and going to a smaller, less established one. So, Kate, let me start with you. When you think about opportunities across different types of companies and the considerations that are important to bear in mind when you're making the jump, maybe when you made your jump, like what comes to mind for you? What are some of the things that might not be as intuitive to some people sitting in the audience here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think first you need to know yourself and where do you get your energy when you're at work, and what do you love to do? And then I think really looking at, there are so many differences between a Series A versus a B, D, a publicly held company. And it's really about what does the business need at that point in time.
Right.
And, for me personally, being able to go in and create was really exciting and compelling. And I'm probably not the person to go in and do the initial creation. I need to be the person who goes in when we have a few things, and great, how do we start to build those for a company that's ready to scale? I think also, not only is it understanding the function and where the function is, but also where's the business from a maturity standpoint? Are they actually thinking that they're ready to evolve the people strategy and that kind of an impact? So there's a lot of factors, I think, to consider.
Knowing what value needs to be created, is that something was that a lens that you actively scanned for, or was that something that you sort of came upon as you were exploring?
I think it was probably coming into it as I was exploring. And then I think also realizing how, from a talent perspective, the organization also needed to shift, because what has gotten us to where we are is not going to get us to where we need to go. And recognizing that the business was ready for some of those and maybe didn't know what it looked like, but were open to it.
Right.
But I don't know that I was completely conscious of it in the moment.
Where the value comes from in the company that is at a certain stage, like Mike, you've talked about this a little bit. I know you've got perspective on it. So what would you say about the kind of value that needs to be created when you're looking at an opportunity as the head of HR coming from, something that's maybe further along, more established?
So look, I think a couple things. I mean, I could share just a couple perspectives to really help. I think the difference when you work in a big company is it's really clear what the agenda is, because the agenda is set on top of an organization. You understand your consumers, you understand sort of the multi-year strategy, kind of all the way down in the organization. When you switch to work for a smaller company of any scale, I think the biggest trick for an HR professional is to understand where value is created in the company. And that can be through the lens of the employee or through the lens of the founder, whatever stage it is, and to really understand what I call value pools. And then, do you have enough people on those value pools? So as an HR professional, one of the things that I really love is I don't do a lot of HR work. There are things that I did in Unilever, which was sort of gold-plated best practice, you kind of had to have a benefits strategy, and you kind of had to have a whatever strategy and a D&I and everything. And here it's like, well, I'm not sure that's really the focus that's going to create the best employee experience or the best outcome financially. So we're just not going to really focus on it. But these three things really matter, and we're going to put people behind those three things. And that's super fun, but it's a very different business model than being in a big company that kind of runs itself and you're a cog in the wheel.
The value pools that will drive the company forward, is that a mindset that CHROs have grown up with, or is that one that you, like yourself, said, this is important and I'm going to look for maybe an opportunity to make more impact in that regard? A little bit of a controversial question, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I only know my perspective, and it's one person's journey. I was fortunate to work at a very good HR practice, but when I started to know that, okay, I want to go do something else, and I started to look at other big companies, and I looked at a lot of companies. When I was talking to people, I was like, oh my gosh, this is cut and paste. It's the same job.
Yeah.
January through April, I know what you're doing. You're doing performance review, right? Everyone's laughing, right? It's like, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
I want to go do something and create HR the way I think it should be run. And maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. But I know I'll have a little bit more fun, and I'll have a little bit more freedom. And I definitely don't have to do comp committee.
Emily, you have unique perspective on this because you've been at seed stage companies, you've been kind of up and down the cycle, Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Like, how do you think about this given your transitions you've made?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Mike and Kate are saying, but I made two really big transitions in my career. The first one was going from Square to Guggenheim.
Yeah.
Square being a pre-IPO hyper-growth fintech. I was employee 700 and we were about 2,000 through IPO when I left. And then I joined an investment bank that was 25 years old, 4,000 people. And I got in thinking, I'm going to bring Silicon Valley to Wall Street. I couldn't be more wrong. And so I was at Guggenheim for 5 years, and the big task at hand I had to learn was how to innovate through influencing via others. At Square, that was a given. You execute great work, you do it quickly, smart people doing smart things. Guggenheim, they don't care how smart or quick you're executing, that you need buy-in. And then I went through that experience again. When I joined one, I'm employee 10. And we're 503 countries. We're 2 years old. And so I had to put all of those building blocks together. We're a very different company today. So to answer your question more directly, for me, it's what am I building and who am I doing it with? But the building blocks for me personally are often very similar, agnostic of stage. You just have to focus on it a little differently.
Let me pull on that a little bit. The misconceptions maybe that exist when it comes to making a jump from like a Guggenheim to a Square, or like a mature company to like a scrappy startup. What are some of the, you think, biggest misconceptions when it comes to joining a startup? I want to go and do X. Like, what is X that's maybe misconceived?
So with startups, I think Mike was maybe commenting on this, but there's some brand around startups. They're chaotic, they're fast-paced, they're this, they're that. I don't think startups have to be unstructured and chaotic. You can be quite sophisticated and a startup. So I think this is a misconception for sure. And as a startup, so much of the focus is on build and survival. And what I think those in our profession should be thinking about very early is how do you create shareholder customer value, even from day one. These types of thoughts with HR leaders don't tend to come until much later in stages, and oftentimes you get a more senior leader in and they've got cleanup crew because the HR team didn't think about the value from day one. So I would say even at the earliest stage, I think you can have an enterprise mindset even from day one.
Got it. Kate, Mike, anything to add on that?
I may just add too, I think, one of the roles that we play is how do we help the business deliver results, right? At the end of the day, that's why we're all employed. And from an earlier stage, you have the opportunity from an org effectiveness standpoint to really help shape, because oftentimes your managers aren't pausing to think about that. And so as you think about how do you help them grow as effectively as they can, make tough talent decisions, or go, wow, we don't have this capability, we've got to put that in, and being a little ahead so that you minimize the backtracking that you have to do, like that can be an incredibly powerful role that you can play depending on the stage.
Mike, what do you think? Anything else to add?
No, let's keep going.
All right, so knowing the value you can bring, the stage of the company, we're kind of kicking that one a little bit. What about, let's talk about sacrifices. What sacrifices were each of you prepared to make, making the jump, given that you're coming from something that's known, mature, established to something maybe a little less so? Maybe that look and felt a little differently. Mike, why don't you start off?
Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to keep it super real. So, for 25 years, I worked with a company that had massive brand identity, and my brand identity was mixed in with that brand identity. So, the first thing, when I knew I didn't want to go back to London, which was to, again, do the chief HR officer for Unilever, which was amazing, I had to decide what it is I wanted to do. And the first question is, I had to get over my ego, because I was moving to a company that nobody ever heard of, and were going to constantly say to me, why? I thought Mike was great. Why is he at this place? And by the way, it's not easy. And through lots of coaching conversations and a lot of good friends, somebody asked me a question. So when you're looking for a job, do you know what's going to make you happy in that job? I was like, yeah, of course. I've done HR for 25 years. I need autonomy. I want to be able to have impact. I want to work with a great team. They're like, no. What's going to really make you happy? I was like, really make you happy? And I went, oh, shit, that's a completely different conversation. Because there's a different list. It was, I don't want to travel as much. I don't want to be on global calls. I don't want to wake up in Singapore. I don't want to have to sell everything. I don't want to. And then when I made that list and the first list, and I went, if I can merge those things together, that's great. And I don't really care about the rest of it. I want to do great work with great people, and I'll figure the rest out. But you do have to, at least for me and a lot of people, you have to kind of get over that hump of saying, yeah, I'm going to work at a company maybe nobody's ever heard of before.
Having your identity tied up with the brand that you're working for was a big one for you.
It was for me, yeah.
Yeah. Kate, how about
I
you?
totally echo that. I think there's a paradigm shift that you have to have. And I think for me, one of the things also is patience, because you walk into a company where you've had the privilege of being in some pretty sophisticated organizations, and then you walk into a company and you're like, oh, like this, what you consider basic is not there, and you have to meet the company where you are, or where they are. And if you don't have the patience to do that, like you're just setting yourself up for continued frustration. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, because I'm not a patient person. And I was like, come on, we can be there tomorrow. And the fact of the matter is, everything has to go through a change process.
Right.
You have to meet an organization where they are and then help them see the possibility.
Yeah, so my first thought when you asked the question was ego, but I'll take it another direction since y'all have heard some different responses. One of the things I was prepared to sacrifice is figuring out how to not be defensive in how I think about my role. And so in larger scale companies, you're probably working with, or I should say enterprise companies, you're probably working with people who've worked with HR folks before. They know the questions, they know what to expect, they have a point of view. In startups, you might be working with folks who don't really know how to work with you. Get over it, honestly. Our jobs are to partner and help people understand what we do. We don't have to remind them that we're real smart in X, Y, and Z. And so part of that is just keep a real humble, low ego and don't be defensive about it. For me personally, it's like, hey, you know what? Let me talk you through how I think about that. And would you like to spend some time going through that spreadsheet with me? And that's helped me build stakeholder value across different functional areas, agnostic of size.
So meeting them, well done. Meeting them where they are, check. But let me push on all of you on that one. We talked a little while ago about how in a startup setting you might have an opportunity to be more of like a shaper, an influencer of culture, or be more kind of provocative, be a provocateur. Does that kind of play into it? Was that something you were looking for? Is that something that you see kind of currently in your role?
Well, that was the fun part, right? Like that was I get to get in here and I get to create and think about those things. I play a broader role in a smaller organization than I would have played, in my functional swim lane. So being able to bring different perspectives, try things, get to shape, that's the fun part of coming into a smaller organization or an earlier stage organization.
Was that table stakes, or was that something that you knew was there, but you had to cultivate, or maybe?
It's a little bit of both. I mean,
Yeah.
that was an attraction for me to come in. And then you also, to your point, sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And so then there's an education and how do you crawl, walk, run
Yeah.
with the organization. So that goes back to the patients and meeting them where they are.
Yeah. Mike, Emily, anything on that?
Nothing to add.
Perfect answer.
All right, let's switch. Red flags. If you're looking and you're considering kind of everything you're saying, and you say, you know what, I'm going to put a couple new lenses on my search from maybe enterprise to startup. What are some of like the obvious blinking red flags that you would advise people listening here to bear in mind as they think about making that switch?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say for
Hey,
me
dude.
personally, red flags are just things I'm looking for. I'm really interested in working with an experienced leadership team. So for me personally, first timers, it's a no. And the reason for that is I don't want to be their experiment. And so I'd rather work with experienced folks. The other things, I'm a little bit more risk adverse in my sort of stage in my career. So companies I'm looking for, they're not the latest fad, and I'm okay with boring. I've spent the last decade in regulated business like fintech and financial services, and there's a ton of really interesting pieces of work. So for me personally, experienced leadership team, and will this company be around in 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to tons of companies. I think there are lots of red flags. The most important thing is if it doesn't feel right, don't pursue it. I mean, I think, if you're going into a startup and you're going into, or I'm in a private equity company versus a venture back, but if they won't show you the investment thesis or their strategic plan, don't take the job. Well, why wouldn't you? I'm going to sit I'm a C-suite member trying to drive enterprise value. Why wouldn't you show me the investment thesis or your strategic plan or whatever deck you did to get your funding? And there's some of those kinds of things I think are really important. Or, if the CEO doesn't feel like that CEO, even though they did the first base camp, can get you to the second or third base camp, it's going to be a tremendous uphill battle. So I think getting the connection right with the leadership team, but particularly the CEO, I think that's one, the next time I do something, whatever that is, I'm not looking to leave yet, but I will focus predominantly on the progressiveness of the CEO.
There's a couple questions that have come in, all from anonymous. On the CEO topic, how do you get your CEO founder to leverage your full skill set as a strategic partner, and not just transactional, especially at earlier stages?
I think you just do it. Like, I think you get in and you do the job that you know, and you know where you have impact, and you role model it. I think that if I think about my CEO today, he's amazing, he's brilliant. He didn't know what he didn't know about what a strong people function could deliver to the business.
Yep.
And we've showed him. The team has showed him, and I think now we get the pull, right? And that's what it comes down to.
Just go do.
Mhm.
What do you think, Emily?
Yeah, my gut reaction is don't ask permission, you do it. And our job on the people function is oftentimes we're the leader behind the leader. And the way I view our relationship with the CEO is really around how do you help the CEO enable the rest of the business. And so any tooling, perspective, objective point of view is high value to the CEO. So I don't think they don't know what they don't know. You just do it. And if they like it, you'll get that signal. If you don't, you'll get that signal too. And you move on.
I mean, great answers. Just the only thing I can think of is, we always hear, really be a good business partner, understand the business. I think finding a way to talk about value creation, not through HR programs.
Right.
So, small sample, we hire doctors, we need lots of doctors. So if you go to the doctor and there's no doctor, that sounds a little bit funny, but it's true, then there's no revenue for our company. So I don't talk about the HR solution, I talk about how do we get more doctors? And what if I could find you 100 more doctors? They start to say, well, that's a value pool of 40 million. What would that be worth to you?
Yep.
And you start that conversation and you say, great, well, you surely would invest $2 million to get 40, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Great, here's my plan. And I think the less you get out of HR speak and more into helping them uncover the things, you just bring HR solutions to business problems,
Right.
right? And I think if you're able to do that in any company, you're going to be effective, but particularly in companies that are startup and, you know, they have lots of decisions to make and they're probably pretty stressed about it without the infrastructure.
So just go do, ask for forgiveness and not for permission, and work backwards from value. And you can't do any of that unless you know, back to some of our earlier comments, what value you're bringing to this company at this stage, right? And companies might be at different points of stability and instability. There's another question here that's kind of right in line with that. And maybe it goes back to some of the sacrifices and things you think about every day. So how does the natural instability of startups affect your day-to-day work? Not a loaded question. Is that something you're just living with and you're saying, I'll take it as it comes? Or,
and I think, I'll never forget, I was at a private equity held company many years ago, and this deal was supposed to go through right before I was hired. And literally, I quit my job, I call the CEO, and he's like, well, that deal that we were putting together, it fell through and we could be bankrupt in 90 days. Do you want to go back to your old job? And I was like, and then I was like, no, because you know what? I've never been through a bankruptcy. What a great learning opportunity. And so I think I did.
And they filled the job.
By the way, we did turn it around a year later and sold the company, and it was a
good
great
ending,
exit
good
and everything
ending.
else.
Yeah.
But
saved it.
But I think like the world is unstable, and it's all about you're conscious of understanding that, and so you just have to kind of go with it.
Enterprises are no less unstable, double negative than startups, right? I mean, we've seen 250,000 tech workers last year. Maybe it's just a different type of instability.
Except for one thing, you can come in at any given moment and the CEO can say, you're out, right? Because I don't like the way you interacted with me, or Elon Musk can send an email to 150 people and say, today's your last day. And there's no natural infrastructure that you have in a GE or an IBM or some of those other sort of companies where that sort of, the system regulates itself. That instability is there. So you have to, I think, find a sweet spot of being pushy, but not push too hard to the point where, you're personally at risk. And I don't think I do a very good job of that, by the way. I think I'm probably like half the time he wants to fire me.
You know who you are.
Yeah, I think he wants to fire me like most of the days. But I've made him a lot of money so far.
Emily, how does that resonate for you? Stability, instability, how do you experience that day to day?
Yeah, for me, instability or chaotic, these are all perspectives you can choose to see or not see. And so for me, the way I approach hypergrowth companies, I've done 3 of them, is putting order into chaos. It's chaotic organizations, that is proprietary somewhere else. But I really focus on what I can control. So I'm not too fussed about instability or chaos. I just choose not to engage with it, but I am aware that it happens, and I calibrate and keep good comms internally to make sure that I'm not, being tone deaf or, misaligned to the business.
So knowing what value you bring to different types of companies to drive value and how you look at risk and stability, hypothetically, would you ever go back to the type of companies that you've been at? Larger, more established, safer, quote unquote? If yes, why? If no, why not?
I would never say never. Again, that CEO relationship, what's the value prop of the company? Are they growing? There's so much. I would never say never. Mm-hmm. This is really fun, what I'm doing right now. So, but you can never say never. I can't.
For me, hindsight is 20/20. I would probably say yes to all of my previous experiences just because I would approach the problem differently. So similar, never say never.
Yeah, I think the same, except I don't see it happening. I think I am having too much fun probably to go back, and I don't want to deal with the bureaucracy anymore, and I don't have to deal with it. We don't have staff meetings. I've never had a staff meeting in the year I've been at the company.
We had a 60-minute...
Let that sit in for a moment. Never had a staff meeting.
To organize this and just get our heads in the game beforehand, I called a 60-minute meeting for a 30-minute panel, and Mike gave me shit about that. It's like we're having a 60-minute for a 30-minute panel. Ian, what are you doing? I was like, Mike, I'm a big company guy. Sorry. All right, so we're keeping our options open, and it's not a one-way door, is it? Right? You can switch to and from, and it's not something that you can't walk back?
I don't think so. And I also think large companies have a lot that they can learn from an earlier stage organization and vice versa, right? So like being able to move back and forth, if there was, something that was really compelling, I would never say never.
Yeah, good answer. This was going to be a lightning round, but we've got 4 minutes, so we'll stretch this a little bit. To go back in time to your former self when you were thinking about making this jump, if you could give yourself one piece of advice at that moment, what would it have been?
Be patient.
You stole mine. Be patient. Meet them, really understand where they are so you can meet them and share your vision of the possibilities that can be.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I struggled a little bit with it when you said it. I think for me, it's really, I think I would just say I wish I did a little bit more homework of what I was walking into, because I made a lot of sacrifices. I moved my kids in high school. I took a massive salary cut based on where I thought the company was going and value creation. And I would say my lesson is focus on the work and the impact. And I don't really care about the money, or I wouldn't say that one company so long. But I think, is the work going to get you out of bed in the morning, and are you super fulfilled? And I am. I just think the jobs to be done were different than it's ended up being, which has been also fun. I thought I took a different job.
Yeah.
And thought I was an HR guy and I wouldn't make that mistake, but I think I sort of did.
Let me hit a couple more questions that have come in. One from Valerie. So we're a scale-up building towards enterprise infrastructure maturity with a startup soul. What are the best bits of both to model as we mature beyond quote-unquote puberty? Anybody want to take a stab at that one? You stunned us, Valerie. You stumped the panel. Well done.
I think there are pieces of your culture. And when I say culture, it's not about, oh, hey, I like to go have a beer with this person. Because I think culture and liking people often get, misconstrued, right? I like someone, therefore we have a good culture, as opposed to we have a culture that has customer empathy, that we help each other out, those things. I do think really intentionally managing the experiences that you're creating to continue that culture as you scale, but also being really transparent with the organization about what does need to be different in order to achieve the next results that are in there. And that transparency and helping people walk through the journey is not easy, but I think it is helpful.
For me, I'm a big fan of the giving away your Legos mentality. So every 6 months, I give away 80% of my job and I fire myself. And then I move on to the next thing. And that's allowed me to scale the team. It's allowed me to expose people to new projects. But I've seen massive impact on the giving away your Legos approach to work in this evolution you're referring to.
So you're disrupting yourself to scale yourself.
Have to.
Did that come naturally? Was that something that you had to kind of bravely step into the first time you gave away your Lego?
I realized my role was going to debilitate the business if I was not focused on recruiting specifically. So I needed to change my approach.
Smart. Mike would say anything on that?
I'm not going to follow those two amazing women that just answered that question. I'm not that stupid.
All right, 45 seconds left. There's a couple more questions here. We might have to take them in the hallway. We've got a group coming in after it. But I guess any last parting thoughts, advice you might give to anyone in the audience thinking about making this jump? We talked about working backwards from value, disrupting yourself, meeting them where they are. Anything to add or pile onto that?
I would say enjoy the journey. There's such an echo chamber of, this job is hard. We've gone through COVID together. Of course, these things are true, but enjoy their journey, enjoy the ride, enjoy the relationships you're building, and don't get lost in the sauce. That would be my advice.
Kate?
I would just say there are very interesting components at every stage. You just have to focus on what gives you energy. And that's where you go, if I have energy and I can deliver value for the business, that's a match made in heaven.
All jobs are great and all jobs suck. So you have to find, it's components of every job, right? So I think find the elements where you can have the most fun. And then if you really ask yourself what really makes me happy, and you can spend more of your time in that space, less in the suck, you're gonna be generally pretty happy. And I think that these kinds of roles give you more opportunity to do that, I think. But just follow that answer and you're probably gonna be pretty happy.
Hashtag Mike said.
We're out of time. Give it up for Kate, Mike, and Emily.